Hi students, this is Suchya teaching you SST, and now I am about to teach you the 5th chapter of class 7th history, and the name of the chapter is Rulers and Buildings. At the beginning of every history, you have seen that the kings have occupied a certain area. Then they began the process of expansion, then gave proper administration, governance, and then came the last work which they did. That is when they stabilized themselves, when they knew that now their rule had become strong enough and they had laid the foundation of a strong, efficient empire. They all started buildings. That is, they started constructing buildings. And in this chapter, we shall be reading about the various buildings which the Mughals had built in this period. The first picture which is given in your textbook is of the balcony of Qutub Minar, which was started by Qutbuddin Aibak in 1199 AD. Now here you will see that there are beautiful arches and geometrical designs in the balcony which is there. Besides, there are two bands of inscriptions at the bottom of it. Now this inscription is in the Arabic language. It was not easy to have this kind of a structure in those times, when the skills were less, when there was not proper engineering skills available to the people. But it is a grand building with efficient engineering skills. Then we see that the surface of this minar is both curved and angular in nature. So that's the description of the beautiful Qutub Minar's balcony, which is given at the beginning of your chapter. Then comes that between the 8th to 18th century, there were two kinds of buildings which were generally constructed by the kings or the sultans. And the first kind of buildings which they made were the forts, the palaces. So it was generally forts, palaces and tombs. That means a place wherein they could rest in this world and after death. The second kind of building that they constructed were the temples, the mosque and the tanks and the bazaar and so on. Now this kind of building which they constructed were meant for public utility. So the first kind of building was meant for the exclusive use of the nobility and also of the high officials or the nobles and the king himself. But the second kind of building which they constructed were meant for everybody. Now, after some times, the merchants also started building splendid temples, mosques and also residential buildings for themselves. Of course, very few structures of residential buildings of the merchants are available to us. Let's talk about the engineering skills of that time. The first striking feature that comes to our mind is that of a monument. Now, the striking feature again in a monument is that of a roof. Now, how do you construct a roof? A roof is generally made with the wooden beams and this is placed in between the four walls that you have of the room. But think of it that if you have to build a huge room, a big room with a superstructure, how difficult it must have been. I'll talk about more of their skills in the coming clipping.